Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's BAInsights. And today we'll be discussing how business analysts can be more impactful. And for today's session, I'm really pleased to welcome two guests. Two guests actually have been on the show before, and his opinion I really value. So it's really good to have them both on a session, Karen and Hannah. And perhaps we'll start with some introductions. Start with yourself, Hannah.
Tēnā koutou katoa, Hannah Takuingawa. Hello, my name is Hannah. I'm a business analyst professional from Wellington, New Zealand, and excited to join you in the evening. These guys are drinking coffee. We'll have a stiff drink afterwards. That's me.
Thank you, Hannah. It always makes us jealous when I have these sessions this time in the morning, and you are finishing your day, and I'm just about to start mine. So thanks for the reminder, Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Newnham. I'm a principal business analyst for an arm's length body in the UK government, and been a BA for quite a long time. I'm just waking up, so I've got my coffee, but depending on how this goes, I might need a stiff drink afterwards. But hopefully it should go very smoothly.
I'm sure it'll go swimmingly, as I say. Thank you both for your introductions. Well, let's start. I mean, the subject of the session is about how BAs can be more impactful. So let's start with that high-level question. I'll ask you first, Hannah. How do you think business analysts can be more impactful in their role?
Like, big question, like ginormous. So for me, like, my answer to that is always for the people who, and lots of people ask this question, right? They ask in lots of different ways. Like, I'm trying to achieve something, I'm trying to get this across the line. What they're actually asking is, how can I influence and how can I have impact? And the answer is always look further up than you think you should be looking, is like looking at the system around you and actually understanding like what you're interacting with, and then like making deliberate choices to interact with that system in a way. It's always look up. It's not your documents. It's not that PowerPoint. It's who's got the power in the room and who's actually making decisions, is the highest level answer I can give you.
I think that's an excellent start, Hannah. I mean, and yeah, I can definitely appreciate that. That if we keep ourselves in the weeds, working with maybe the end users, that will hopefully have an impact for them. But actually, as you say, looking up, it gives you the opportunity to go broader as well. Yeah, excellent start. Thank you. And Karen, that same simple question to you as well.
Yeah, okay. So I just kind of looked at my notes and I thought, Hannah's answer is really good. Look up. I guess mine kind of boils down to look round as well. So it's the same sort of thing, kind of go beyond the context. Go beyond. A lot of BAs that I've worked with will say, I've been asked to do X, and then they just work within X, and they don't try and understand the context and why X is being asked about, and they'll just go and collect that information. But sometimes that thing, that X, isn't the right thing, or it might be subtly different depending on the context. So I've also written down kind of the comment of meeting people where they are. And I've done a previous talk on this with the SysKD, taking people's solutions that they come with and kind of working with those. Because I think you could be more impactful if you're meeting your stakeholders where they are, rather than kind of swooping in and going, right, I'm going to save you now. I'm going to kind of, you don't know the answer, I know the answer. That's not a good place to start to try and be impactful with people, right?
I agree. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's amazing. I thankfully not too many, but I have worked with occasional BAs that feel that their role is to sell the initiative or the idea to the people who are supposed to have the requirements as well, and that is the opposite of being impactful, I would suggest. But yeah,
well, both ways are problematic, right? Like, if you order take from both sides, whether it be like the business, go sell this to your stakeholders, or hey, stakeholders, tell me what you want and I'll go sell it to the business. Like, that's literally just moving information around and not actually impacting it. So I think it's you can fall into the pitfalls from both directions. Even if you feel like you're serving the right thing, like you've got to influence what's actually the movement of information.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting that, I mean, I had on my notes as well, that a very similar view from yourselves. I put sort of like cross-functional thinking, trying to think more strategically. But you're right, Hannah, as well. I mean, it's if you happen to be a BA who generally thinks at that level, being more impactful will also entail looking deeper as well and working with the end users a bit more, or the customers a bit more. And I also was thinking as well about that just generally, I think business analysts can be more impactful by, just not forgetting to share the good practice that they've done, and actually, being comfortable sharing that they've done a piece of analysis, sharing what their approach was, sharing what their findings are, and actually helping others see that there are probably some mistakes along the way. So I think that can help impact the team overall. And I often found one as well, by me trying to share what I've done, it forces me to consider my approach as well, which in turn I think and I hope makes me a little bit more impactful as well in the future.
You definitely should work out in the open as a BA and share sort of regularly. And I've had BAs in my teams before who have been, in fact, it's quite common for BAs to be reticent about sharing their kind of models. They'll go off and they'll use the tools and the toolkit and they'll create some stuff, and then they'll be like, oh, this probably looks right. And I'm like, have you actually had any conversations with any stakeholders about, is this right? Am I missing anything? Was there anything kind of that doesn't make any sense to you? And there is an element of, when you're talking to those stakeholders, sometimes they don't grasp the models that we've got, but it's important to remember the models are a means to an outcome. And so if you're keeping them to yourself, then they're not really doing the job that they're supposed to do. So that's another, I think, key point for being more impactful, is share your information, and have those discussions frequently about what those models are telling you.
Yeah,
and should never underestimate what you think is oh, they're going to see my ugly work and it's not going to be cool. Other people don't know what we know, the tools, and so they're like, oh, this is under the hood, and it often breeds a whole bunch of respect, oh, you did this, this is what's underneath here. You get way more buy-in with transparency than you ever do with here's the pretty end product.
Yeah, I think that's another excellent point, because I think you can be impactful across all of your stakeholders the more transparent you are. Unless I'm on a particularly sensitive project and where this next bit is not going to apply, but generally I try to be as transparent with my analysis as possible, share it, as soon as I've basically come off a session, try and write up what I can in some form, put it out there, ideally on a SharePoint or a conference page or somewhere, and encourage my stakeholders to go refer to it, see what's developing, and more importantly, tell me if there's things that are incorrect or that they need to add to as well. And I think that can help sort of almost leverage yourself and extend the reach, so that hopefully you'll make more impact, I guess, for this conversation, but more broadly, more benefit, hopefully, the right conversations, getting more perspectives and being more inclusive with reviews as well.
It's scary, right? But so I think service design or design thinking have the idea of shitty first draft. That is a proper term. I'm not just making it up, and I'm not just swearing for the sake of swearing at this early in the morning. But that is what Hannah said. That's kind of just sharing out what you've got and saying is this right? And so you don't have to have learned all the BPMN kind of terms and kind of shapes and whatever. You can do a lot by just getting and just drawing a couple of boxes. I guess there is a little bit of barrier when we're all remote, is that's far easier to do on a whiteboard than it is to kind of maybe constructing it online. But 2 or 3 boxes can sometimes be massively powerful.
Yeah, make it easy for the stakeholder. 100%.
It makes me think as well about that failing fast in the sense, in that as you say, if you can get a draft view of what you understand or what you believe the solution or approach might be, then the quicker you get it out there, then it's open for people to correct you and say, actually, that's a different direction than I intended. It's not really the message that I thought of giving you. Gives them a chance to correct things rather than keep it to yourself and then deliver a lovely piece of analysis that's completely off track, as it were.
Yeah.
So I think another excellent point. I wonder, Karen, as well. What's the impact what's the effect of having impact on business analysis for the individual and for the wider team as well?
Yeah, I think I was going to talk about this in a later question, but I'll just briefly touch on it now. I think it depends on the structure around you, the business sort of organizational structure around you. It is a constraint or I can't think of the word, but it could potentially constrain. It depends on what that organisational structure is, how impactful you can be. But certainly you being impactful, if you're saying a team, and building that trust with stakeholders are going to start to help open doors in the future. I mean, I've worked on lots of both for you and open those doors both for you and the team. So I've worked on things before where, say, call centres where they've been burnt by business analysis before, and then that makes it really hard for you to get in there next time. So there is your kind of you're holding up the flag for business analysis. If people see that they're getting that trust, and they think that you're there for them as well. That point that I made earlier about you're not the person coming along and saying that's the answer. You don't know what you're talking about. If you're going to meet them where they are, if you're going to have some empathy with them, then they are going to, next time around, they're going to trust that role a little bit more. As we all know in this call, there's lots of misinformation about what business analysis does, and so sometimes you do meet teams that are, okay, well, I thought you did this, or I thought you did that. So again, there's that bit of education, there's that bit of showing them what good business analysis can look like, and so that, I think, does wonders for a bigger team when you're trying to build a community of business analysis. And then I start to get advocates across the organisation who, in these bigger meetings, as you're managing, as you're going sort of up the chain, they're having good conversations. And I think as well that people want them to have, directors and the board to have good conversations about business analysis. I don't necessarily care about that. I care about them having good conversations about outcomes, so that they can see that this function provides good outcomes relevant of what, they don't need to understand, they don't need to go under the hood and kind of figure out what's going on.
I would agree. And actually a really interesting point about just thinking, what's gone on before you, really, because maybe it's about recognising that there could be a history for the stakeholder, and you might be, hopefully, you're carrying on the positive vibes that they have from their past experience, but maybe sometimes the opposite is happening. So that can definitely have an impact on, what they think about business analysis or the questions you're about to ask before you've even opened your mouth. So that's quite an interesting perspective. But also it makes me think as well about the sort of like the impression that you leave behind as well. Particularly, maybe it's more important for if you're part of a team, because if you're part of a BA team, the likelihood is, that you're going to know the people that are going to come in after you, and it could be that you might be changing around a little bit during the initiative or during your time. So it's doubly important to make sure that your teammates, when they come in, that they've got a positive basis to go from, because hopefully you've represented their profession and their group well before you started. So excellent point there. Thank you, Karen. Definitely one as is normal for these sessions, there's many perspectives that come up that I think, that's a really good one. I would never have thought about that. So excellent. Hannah, I'll ask the question again because it was a little while, but so what can affect the impact rather of business analysts for the individual or the team?
What can affect?
What can affect the impact? What can affect the impact? Sorry, that was my question. I know last time I didn't ask it very well, and I thought I'd better ask it again, just so it's very clear what the question is.
I want to riff off Karen's point though. I'm sorry, I'm going to go wild. I said that I might go rogue, but I think I want to make a point beyond her point, which is not just about setting up and leaving good impressions, but it's also helping stakeholders. And I don't like the term use, but I'm going to use it here because it's the simplest construct for this, of how they can interface with us. I feel like oftentimes, historically, I've come across situations where they'd be like, oh no, you can ask me to get to an outcome, not an analysis decision, but to an end point, an output that you need in order to be able to use it for your board papers or your decision. You can help direct how I approach this piece of work. You can choose the level of rigor. You can choose the risk, and helping stakeholders understand that this isn't just that once you hand it off into the BA black box, the output will come and the BA is in charge of that, it's a collaborative process to define that. And I think that we've all got a duty to, every time we have that touch, help them see that they can influence what we do and how we approach it to make it as useful, to make it as impactful. Because oftentimes it's not that I know how it's impactful, it's that I'm working with the stakeholder to be like, okay, cool. Who do we need to talk to? What level are they at? What do they need? How does that look like? What are they going to hear about? And how can I make sure that that is accurately represented in the work that we're presenting to them? So sometimes it's not that I'm impactful or the analyst is impactful, it's that I'm helping the stakeholder be impactful, the owner of the decision be impactful, which is it's a subtle but I think quite important difference or an extension to Karen's point.
Yeah, and it makes me think as well about an extension in a slightly different direction in terms of, the wider change team, the project manager, the product owner, the program manager, whatever it might be. They can affect. At least they can potentially have an effect on your impact as a business analyst. I think potentially giving unclear direction in the first instance is probably not a very obvious way to do it, and I think that's quite a good example that the BAs can take that input, and they should take that input and assess it and think, actually, is it enough for me to move forward? And if it's not, it's probably a great point to start challenging or go and clarify and make sure that actually they're not off to a losing start straight away.
The classic one, John, the classic one that you've just prompted me to think about is when BAs join a project team and the project manager's gone, yeah, okay, I've put 3 workshops in. Like, I've got those in the bag, and you're like, hang on, I don't even know, I haven't even had a chance to figure out what I'm doing yet and how that's going to work. And so I encourage members of my team to go, yeah, great. So don't sort of just put a barrier up like, yeah, great, okay, but I'm going to assess the situation. We all know, like, getting workshops in the diary are hard because you've got to get people's time, but don't fall into that trap of going that, the project manager knows what business analysis is required here. You're the expert. Go in, understand the landscape. Obviously, you've got to cut your time accordingly. You might have to time box some things, but then work out okay, I've got some workshops. How am I going to best use those? Or actually, do I need to do some work before? Or do I want to cut those up over different, they'll have come up with a construct because they're trying to be helpful, but you can kind of quite easily get affected by that because you've just gone, okay, well, they know what they're doing. They've been here for a while. I'll just follow what they've said. You have to do that in the right way for sure, because you don't want to you want to work with your project manager, not against them. But that's quite often a trap that people fall into.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it's I won't name names, but I remember I was having a conversation about this only a day ago, actually, and talking about different approaches that the BA in question can try and apply to help with the BA, help the PM. And I think, it goes back to the point Hannah made as well. I mean, by being more collaborative and trying to work with them, but also recognising some of the flaws or inputs that you haven't received from the project manager in this example. And being able to explain to them what you're missing, why it's important to have it, the benefit of it, them actually giving, in this case, clear direction or better scope or whatever it might be, that will help, and it also makes me think about some of those things that are happening more broadly across the change situation, like when it comes to status updates, as an example. The longer I spend as a BA writing a status update or a progress update, the less time I'm spending doing the analysis. So if as part of my analysis approach, I can think about and work with my project manager to find the most appropriate way to share my progress as I go, rather than see it as a separate activity that detracts from the path I'm choosing, then that for me feels like a useful way to be impactful anyway. And that's probably a conversation itself, the amount of different ways you can approach that situation anyway. Good. All right. And I think I've obviously mentioned the team structure as well. If you like the situation we're in with the project team as well. I think sometimes as well, other things I've got down is really just having an unstructured approach, I think, can impact the business analysis impact as well. Sorry, can affect the business analysis impact as well. So And maybe sometimes for some BAs, they might have an unstructured approach because they maybe haven't given themselves enough time. Maybe there's a back to basics reminder there for BAs just to take a breather, take a little bit of time up front, think about what your approach is going to be before just diving straight into the detail.
Yeah, and you might need to negotiate that time, right? Because again, somebody's probably gone, okay, yeah, so this bit of work needs like 6 weeks. And you know, you might have to stick to that 6 weeks. It might be, you know, that's like non-negotiable. But it's always worth asking, because again, someone will have made an assumption in a plan. People have to plan, but you know, they haven't had the luxury of having a BA there to go, sometimes they have, sometimes they haven't. So again, this kind of goes back to structure. So if I've worked in structures where we've got maybe principal business analysts facing off to different business units, then they might have done some early thinking and given it a bit of a sense of, they've been in there early enough to go, yeah, that's a big piece of work, we're going to need this amount of time. But sometimes it's just like, it's a finger in the air, and it'll be from someone that doesn't really know what business analysis, what you'd be doing in that time frame. So it's always good to revisit, you know, those assumptions around timescales, and you know, really checking in, like, what is it do I want to do here? How many rounds do I need to go around those stakeholders? How much complexity have I got with the, you know, the people that are involved? Have I got teams that are going to be hard to onboard? All that stuff's going to, you know, if you're going to do it right, it's going to need more time. So you also, as well as asking for the time, you need to kind of, you know, have done your initial view of what this is going to take, so you can justify what you're asking for. You can say, look, you know, I need this more time because I'm assuming I'm going to have to go around a few times because there's some difference of opinion here, or this is, you know, this is extra complex, or, you know, whatever reason there is. So I think that's, you know, a lot of times, again, people receive a time frame and they accept it without challenge.
Yeah, I would agree. We talked about you know, what can affect the impact of a BA. Feels like we're sort of starting quite nicely to go into the next question of pitfalls to avoid as a business analyst if you want to remain impactful. So under Hannah, are there any pitfalls that occur to you that BAs could avoid if they want to remain impactful?
Well, if I start listing now, I'll take up the rest of the time. So I'm going to I thought about this before joining, because I think it's a really it's a hard question, but it's also the most important, because where you go wrong is you burn. It's so much easier to burn trust and burn your ability to make an impact than it is to, like, once you've built it, like, you've got to maintain it. So I reckon there's, like, in my head, there's 3 levels to it. At the core, you need to be able to do really good work. Like, if you're not doing good analysis, if you can't follow through with, like, solid stuff that like stands the test of time and, like, delivers, and, like, the people who are consuming it rate it, then it's going to be really hard to be impactful, right? Like, so you got to be competent. Then I think there's the network level, and that's like the people level. And so most of, like, what we're talking about when we say impact or influence, what we're actually saying is, like, persuasion and selling and explaining and comms and communication. And that's all network. That's knowing who is where, what they want, why they want it, what power they have, all of that kind of, like, all the people, who's who in the zoo, and who can you call on, who can you, like, leverage. And I think, like, that part is, like, often, like, where, you know, you'd get your senior BAs who would have that network that they're drawing from, or they build that really quickly and they kind of, like, rock that. I think there's a 3rd level. And the 3rd level, I would say, is, like, system. And so that's, like, where is the money coming from? How are decisions being made? Where is the forums? Where is the governance? How can I actually help? Not just that I'm being impactful. How can I help my stakeholders navigate this system around, because they're just wanting to get this problem solved for their team, or they're trying to get this, like, uplift happening in capability over here, or they've inherited this, like, new system that they're going to have to make work, or this regulation has changed. All of those things aren't necessarily things that a stakeholder goes, you know what, I'm going to change regulations today. It's like, actually, no, they're inheriting it just as much as you are often. And so we can be impactful if we can help them navigate that as well. And so that's why I think the 3 levels are. It's like, do good work, because, like, nothing is going to, you can't just swoop in and have opinions and swoop out again. That's the management consultant model, and it doesn't work. 2, know your people and know the persuasion, like classic influence persuasion stuff. And then 3, systems, like thinking, like, know the environment, know how money flows, know how decisions are made. And that, like, it's almost like the avoidance of that is, like, is how you get there, but there's only really one thread that you can get there, and everything else is pitfalls. So not paying attention to your people, not doing the work, not paying attention to the system, like you'll just like hurt yourself in the way of making influence. Sorry, I rattled on because I got excited about that.
I think it's a really good answer, and it shows there isn't just a very simple answer and only one tiny thing that you should avoid. That actually, there's I mean, I know you mentioned three, but there's at least three big things to try and get right.
Yeah.
And anything that can affect your getting those three things right is a pitfall in itself. I think it's quite a nice way.
It's way harder to be impactful than it is to not be impactful. Like, it's really easy to not be impactful. Like, you can just like skate through and not be impactful. Being impactful, that is like quite targeted, and you have to be like, it's not just something that's going to come, it's going to be something that you'll have to like build the skill set, build the network, build the knowledge, build the patterns in order to be able to execute. I mean, I'm keen to know if Karen agrees with me.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I kind of like the model, actually, and I was trying to think, how do I don't think I'm going to be able to successfully slot my thoughts into the model, but I think they do. I'm just going, I can't just pivot my points now into that. But I guess the ones that I had was, so I've already talked about that bit kind of being almost as whoever the project manager or whatever has put you in a box and said, like, this is the work that you're going to do. And so that doing what your point about doing good work is understanding what good looks like, not just kind of accepting that from someone else. So there's that bit of it. I think that first bit as well, or maybe across all of your levels, there's an ego thing. So you talked about the consultancy model of coming in saying, oh yeah, I've saved the world and this is what I need to do. But actually, as if you're, and people want that, right? They'll happily spend the money to do that. And the amount of times I've done work and I've gone, okay, what have we done before? And we've had 5 consultants in, and there's 5 kind of 97 slide packs. I'm not exaggerating. I literally haven't had a 97 pack slides.
I completely believe you.
And then like 3 of them are useful, and all the rest look lovely. But that's kind of where you can fall into that trap as a BA to bring your ego into it as well. Of I know the answer, whereas it doesn't to an extent. It's being right isn't the thing. It's like the communication's the thing. So then back to your model, it's kind of joining up all of those 3 kind of levels back and forth constantly. And so the other pitfall I can see is that people do is that they don't consider that in their time, planning their time. They're like, okay, I just need to do one kind. I just need to figure this out, tell them, and then everybody will be okay. So, but no, that's not good enough. That's like, you have to get everybody aligned. So then your bit about, where's the money, where's the governance, whatever, it might be you need to convince kind of your immediate stakeholders, and then you have to go back and forth and figure out kind of what's important to those budget holders, how you tell the story to them so that you also buy them in. And then you have to constantly keep going around and keeping them kind of together. And I think that's a real underestimation of what we do, is that, the view is, like I say, is just go out, figure out what it is, come back, tell them the right answer.
It's a single loop.
Yeah, the other bit, that iteration bit, is massively kind of underestimated. And unless you grasp that as well, you're not going to be impactful at all. You're going to figure it out, and you see it all the time. Like, BAs get frustrated. They go, "Oh, I know the answer to this," and it's like, have you spoken to anybody like at the board level, or have you kind of got to the board? Because you might not be able to get to them directly, but indirectly, have you understood, like, if they're spending the money, what are their key concerns? Like, are they? Yeah. Do they? You might have put your business analysis kind of outputs as this is all about making the customer happy, for instance. It should be, right? But I'm just kind of making
but it's never quite that simple.
It's never quite that. It's never going to be like this black and white, as I'm saying as well. But it could be, you've misinterpreted, all your stakeholders, and again, they'll all have different perspectives as well. So your immediate stakeholders, your immediate users might be like, I just really need to get the customers happy, whereas like the directors are worried about regulation or something like they're completely disconnected from, they've got a completely different viewpoint, and your business analysis output is now disconnected from like what matters to them. It needs a reframing.
well, that's actually like, oh, I love that you used that word. Framing is this really interesting, like, because we end up with a frame and then we operate within it, and actually true impact is having the widest possible frame, because the amount of times I've had to say to me like, oh yeah, you did really good work and this is really great and we absolutely should do this, and here's why that's absolutely not going to happen until 2029 for various reasons. And let me tell you a little bit about like some of the politics that are happening here that is actually going to impact how things get signed off, right? And like, you have to kind of tell that bad news to some people, and it's true, it's not going to happen, and you feel like a jerk for saying that, but none of our analysis sits in this tiny little box. It's the business wide. It's the business. And so like, it's not as simple as just being this system here, it's this system here. It's, God, what does this whole organization do? What is it turning over? What's its revenue? Money. It always comes down to money, in my opinion.
It always comes down to money, yeah. And I think that we also fall into that pit of, people, when they come up with ideas like, oh, I've got a real problem over here. Like, if I just get this system in, that'll really sort my problem out. And that they're coming at that from a good place, right? But like you say, when you look at it in a broader perspective, it might not be appropriate at all to solve that problem in that way. It might be better to look at it, just from an economics perspective, maybe from an enterprise perspective. There might be different answers, but they will have come to that idea with good intentions. It's like you said about how you land that message of, okay, that's great. Yes. This stuff around here is happening, and this is doing this, and this is happening. So this is kind of how we want to proceed. That can be, again, daunting for BAs to do that. I guess just maybe slightly jumping ahead, but to kind of maybe mitigate against some of those pitfalls is remembering you're in a team. Like, you've got project managers, you've got other people that are involved, you've got the sponsor, you've got like the rest of your team. You might have a head of BA, like I am at where I currently work. And so you can use all of that. You don't have to kind of go in, because it can be hard, especially when they've had like an idea for many years, like they've tried to get something through for like many, many years, and you're telling them that that's not the right answer. Like, we need to look at it like this. That might be quite daunting, and it might take a few times to unpick as well.
But it also doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be business analysts. Like, we're not this, I often find myself challenging business analysts when they're kind of courageously out there fighting this fight to convince this thing. And it's actually like, no, actually, the business owns this, right? Like, there's people who own this, and we need to enable them to be like, the most impactful I've ever been is when I have like kind of operate like a trusted advisor for business people, and then I'm helping them do stuff, and like that it's in the service of something that they're doing. It's not me doing it, because like projects and business analysts and our kind of roles, we don't own the thing. We're there to help make change to the thing. So the person who owns it should really be leading a whole bunch of that. And I don't know whether we empower them enough. I think it's a place that we can get way better at to achieve, like, because we can achieve things through other people. It's not just us.
Yeah. I think that's where your ego comes in as well, because like there's some people that will go, okay, I came up with the answer, so I want to be the one that gets the points for the answer. And actually,
I want to present at the board.
Yeah. But because of what you've just said, it's not us that own it. So there's there's two traps to that. There's like, because we don't own it, we're not going to recommend stuff. Like, absolutely recommend stuff. You've done the analysis. Like, they might have more information that says, that's not the right answer, but recommend it and explain why you've recommended it. You're allowed to do that, right? But the other side of it is, we're not going to get the brownie points for any of this. Like, the best times that I'm impactful is when somebody else has gone and had a conversation that I'm like, I definitely gave that to you, but like, yes, I was never going to be
I love that.
I have to give it. I can't remember what we used to call it, something somewhere, which was like, you've got to get to that point where they think they've got to the answer. Like, sometimes that's the way through. That's the way to be impactful. So you need to let go of your ego in that sense.
Yeah, I agree. And so it also makes me think about, the fact that BAs need to recognise that actually there's not particularly just value in creating analysis artifacts. In fact, arguably there's no value in that. The value comes actually at the end of the delivery, when, as a combination of a delivery team, you produce a product or an outcome that satisfies the need or the opportunity or addresses some problems. of your stakeholders. And actually, I think having that broader view as well, in that sense, can make you think a bit more impactfully. Such as, who is my customer? If I'm a BA and I'm working closely with IT, as an example, well, actually, if I speak to IT, find out what they need from me, find out some of the pitfalls that they've seen in analysis that's gone before me, what questions they typically don't have answers that impact their development, then if I can address those points, then actually that's going to make me be a bit more impactful for my part of the journey.
That's just really made me think of another pitfall, which is thinking that you need to learn coding or to speak to the developers in a technical manner. Like, I've had BAs that are learn Python or something, or R, because they're like, hang on, I can't speak to these people without knowing their language. You don't need to do that. Like, you really don't need to do that. You need to figure out how you bring out what they're talking about in a way that you can understand it. So it's better questioning for sure, but it's not unless you really want to be a developer. And I have been a developer in the past, so maybe my view is slightly coloured by that. But I think there's a logical way of thinking which is different from learning a load of code. It's kind of the basis for being able to do that stuff, and that's where we need to trade from. Not kind of it's not helpful to have those conversations in that way. So that's definitely a pitfall that I've seen many, many times.
It's a nice plug as well for a session I held 1 or 2 sessions ago on, do BAs need to code? And the answer was no. I should add a bit more.
Oh, good. I'm glad about that.
But yes, it is erring on the side of no, I should say. But please watch it anyway.
It's definitely no.
But if we've ruled out, no. I'm trying not to. It is a no, but it is a no. But watch the video anyway.
Spoiler alert.
I would say. I
mean, I guess sometimes it could be good to have a little bit of a play with maybe some SQL or something like that, just to understand how the construct of code works.
You absolutely need to know the concepts. Like, if you're working, you don't need to know the language, but like, in order to be able to ask insightful questions, you cannot ask insightful questions if you don't understand the shape of the things.
That's right.
So I think that electricity drips out the wall. Like, I don't really understand anything, but I can talk to you about your JavaScript front end and how it's going to connect through the API back, I know conceptually the thing, so I can ask sensible questions, even though I have utterly no idea. I think zero.
I think one of my superpowers, and actually my assistant director said this the other day. She said it's like, you're very good at explaining like complicated things simply, but the devs really hate that, because I kind of they'll spend like this time saying 5 minutes of really technical stuff, and I'll go, so you just meant that went in there and that went there, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that is kind of what it was. And so if you can get to that point, which, like you said, is insightful questions, it's understanding the concepts of that. And if you need to learn, if you have to dabble with SQL to do that. If you need to just do a systems essential course, do that. If you maybe as well, I think maybe one entrant is just to do maybe the initial testing, one of the those qualifications, and understand that landscape. Whatever you need to do to understand the concepts, yes. Learning the code, no.
I would agree. And if we rule out coding, but I wonder, are there any techniques though that perhaps BAs could use to help them be more impactful? I'm sorry, Hannah. I think
I think this is both an answer to your question and an extension, right? Like, so we talk about like developers as this kind of breed apart. But let's take that concept that we just discussed of, you need to understand the shape of what they care about and what they're doing, and apply it to everything. Like, that is the technique. If you're talking to a contact center personnel, you should know what what their metrics are that they're going to care about and how they operate their workflow. If you're talking to frontline, you should know how they're doing their bookings and how they're doing their calls. If you're talking to retail, you should understand the logistics of how stuff moves. Like, all of these are shapes of things. You don't need to understand how a piece of clothing gets from X to blah, but all of this is making it easy for that person to engage with what you're saying, and for you to be able to ask questions that make sense. And it also just makes it easy for them, because they don't have to go, okay, I'm explaining to you like you're 5, because this is my world, and of course this all makes sense to me, and I'm having to get you up to speed. That is possibly the most way that you can make impact from conversations, is because you can go to them and make it as easy for them to tell you what they need or tell you what they think. Sorry, I totally hijacked, but I got excited.
Well,
I think that's the right approach, because I mean, and actually it makes me think. I mean, I know I asked a question about techniques, but I'm going to interrupt myself as well and think about that, because I think, as well as techniques, sometimes having just examples of of business situations, or the type of information that you're sharing with technology or solution providers or whoever, having examples is really helpful, and it can impact how they think about the questions you're asking. And what I try to think about in that sense is not having examples that are so closely aligned to the scenario that they become an easy way out for my stakeholders to go, yeah, that sounds okay, we'll have that as the answer, but something that's comparable on a completely different topic, so they can't nick it and they have to think about their own situation and their own answers or questions as well.
Wow, both your kind of points link well to my points, I think, although I'm good at like linking everything to everything. I'm a kind of very big picture thing. Everything becomes back to one thing to me. So I wrote down, because that bit around what you were saying, Hannah, about using that what I'd said for developers across everyone, it links back to what you said about insightful questions. You can't ask insightful questions unless you know the context and know what's important to them. So I'd written like Catwoe as maybe one example of a tool that you could use, because that would be, to me, that's trying to understand their world and get the empathy around what their world's about, so that you know what to hone into, or how to frame things in a way that they're going to engage with you, because they see that you're understanding what their world's about, whether it's in the operational space or the dev space or marketing or whatever. And maybe use a journey mapping as well, kind of having a context to work within that's I like user journey mapping over process mapping at this point, at that kind of early point of trying to get everybody to understand, because they can rally around quite easily without having to understand kind of what's going on in the process world. They can see like, hang on, that bit doesn't make sense to me, or that bit doesn't, there's a bit that we do that kind of isn't represented in that journey map. So I think those are tools, but they're all kind of to do with understanding the context and getting some empathy around what that area is tackling, what they care about. I guess I've gone in and simply and kind of asked people what their top 3 issues are, so that I can understand sort of, maybe that's not for everybody. Maybe that's not asking the kind of users on the ground, but the sponsor and maybe some of the seniors, like what is it they're actually trying? What are the things that they're really trying to want to move the dial on with this piece of work, so that you understand the context. I think that's really important. But you're really trying to, echoing back what we've said in previous questions, you're really trying to build that empathy and build that trust. That's the important thing, right? Otherwise, you're not really going to get very far.
Great. And I mean, and I know you've obviously said far more points than I'm going to summarise in this one statement I'm going to make. But I think some of those techniques you called out and messages you called out around context, taking one example, I think is really important. It can help get everybody on a similar page and understand the situation, understand why you're all together, what it is you're trying to achieve. And that in itself is something that really resonated. I mean, as do it all, in fairness, but I think that's something that definitely want to repeat. Good. I mean, are there any? I guess, any other techniques? I know you've mentioned Karen's mentioned CATWO, so customer, actor, transformation, worldview, owner, environment. There we go. Said it all. So if anyone can look that up and actually look into what all that stuff means, please do. I won't tell you here, but there may be a session on it later. But aside from that, aside from process and user map, journey maps, which is totally I agree with, Hannah, is there any other techniques that you might suggest at this stage?
I think I just want to agree with Karen about I think the framing I often use in my work is, we need the map so everyone can point to it, right? Like they need to be able to orientate themselves in it. And maps are often, again, now I'm going to link everything together. Like it's storytelling. We're telling stories. We're explaining stuff. We need to help them see themselves in the story and then help them see how they can what influence they have, or what that looks like for them. And that's true for talking to the CSR when you're changing the system. And it's true for the executive who's going to go try to sell something to the board. Like, all of this is just stories, because that's how humans work, right? Like, at the end of the day, we're storytellers. And so, yeah, my go-tos would be story map, customer journey, like service blueprint. Like those like big picture stuff is like can be amazingly impactful. And I don't mean like exactly how Nelson Norman does it or whatever. I mean something that you can put in front of executive that tells them the full story and some of the complexities. You're telling the story of what you're trying to say. Yeah, other than that, just engaging with all the things.
Yeah, I think trying to balance that up and actually find different techniques and approaches that can, give that information and collaborate with different people at different levels is important. I think, certainly the level of detail I might go into with subject matter experts and the team might be quite low in terms of process, as an example. But with the execs and sponsors, they're not necessarily going to want to see that level of detail. So it's a slightly different technique and approach I might have to use to extract what's important for them as well.
Definitely tailor your approach. I see that as well. Like people trying to, back to our pitfall thing, trying to use the same model. Yeah, there are models that can go beyond the different levels. So the journey map is, I think, particularly good for that. But I was going to mention two others. So first, SIPOC, so supplier input, process output, customer. I don't always again put that in front of people, but I think it's a really good one to be able to go like, who am I dealing with here? Like what's the ecosystem here of the thing that we're talking about? So that might be useful. And the other technique I use loads, because this is how my brain works, is I use analogies. But analogies are really important, right? Because people only understand a concept based on what they already know. So when you've got, like, say, these very technical people going, I want to explain it like this, the reason that stuff's not landing is because they're not making a connection between what that person already knows, that audience already knows, and what they know. So if there's a massive chasm, then that's not going to work, right? So analogies bridge that chasm, because they go, and what I tend to use is analogies of like the home or the office or something you've been doing, with things that are universally understood, so that whole audience get it. It might seem like dumbing down sometimes, but it's the important point of, you'll get that thing where people are just nodding and going, I get it, if you try to explain it in a technical way, because they don't want to kind of admit that they don't get the thing. Whereas if you take them down to the level of, like, everybody gets, like, when I bring a tradesman in and how I have to manage them and like what I'm going to have to do to change the pipes or whatever, you take it down to that level, everybody's like, okay, I get this. And then they might start, not everybody engages with it, but you'll start perhaps getting questions back of like, okay, well, what does it mean in this term? And then they'll sort of play with the analogy themselves. So I guess it's a technique. Some people like it, some people I don't think like it at all, but it's definitely, you need to understand that your audience isn't going to be able to grasp something if what you're trying to explain them is so divorced from the landscape and the context that they understand.
Yeah,
that's such a great suggestion.
And in the session as well, I mean, we've obviously covered a lot. We're very, very close to the end now as well. But we've covered a lot for people in terms of understanding how BAs can be more impactful. Those topics, things that can impact your ability to be impactful. Some of the pitfalls. We've been talking about techniques as well, and now we've sort of been covering some of the softer skills like storytelling, empathy, as a couple of examples as well. And I think all of this sort of shows that there's not just one thing that you can do to be impactful. It's a variety of things. I think we've heard from the start and all the way through that it's about many things: looking at yourself, looking at the team, thinking broadly, looking up, looking down, looking sideways as well, and many more things besides. So it feels like probably a fairly good place to draw things to a close. I think you've been hopefully instrumental. You certainly have been to share some things with me that were very useful to hear for sure, and insightful. I'm sure that'd be the case with the audience as well. So I would just like to say to the audience, thank you for listening. If you've got any comments you want to share, any questions or thoughts on this, or ways that you're impactful, please share it. It's very interesting to hear those views. But until that time, actually, I should also mention, please like and subscribe as well. I think as this is going on YouTube, I have to mention that. I think it helps. But otherwise, the most important thing to mention is to thank you both. Thank you, Hannah and Karen, for sharing your insight. Thank you for being available at different ends of your day so that we can all speak.
I'm sorry.
It just shows as well that maybe a way that we're all impactful is being able to find that middle ground where it's able to bring everybody together and collaborate in the way that the three of us have done for the last almost an hour, I would say. But no, it's an excellent talk to you, as it always is. I look forward to the next time that we chat. And until that time, I'll look out for, I know you're both active in the BA community, so I'll definitely keep an eye out, as I always do, for anything that you share or are involved in. And I encourage anyone who watches this to do so. But thank you again, both.
Thanks for having me.